Hey everyone, it's Mark, your firefighter, realtor, and out-of-state investor. Today I have a special guest on, Nathan Mirth. He's from Undor Properties, every REI Tools, but he's a husband, he's a father, he's a tech worker, he's an entrepreneur, and he's an out-of-state real estate investor. And welcome, Nathan, to my channel.
Mark, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, so I'm glad you reached out to me on social media,
Of
and I
course.
feel like our stories are very similar. We live in a high cost of living area, and sometimes the numbers, they just don't make sense to invest in our backyard. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your portfolio and your background?
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks for having me, Mark. Really appreciate it. Always awesome, exchanging on social media and whatnot. I love to kind of follow you and watch your story. But yeah, I guess I wonder where to start maybe. So I'm based here in the Bay Area, California. So as you mentioned, and I think similar to where you are, super high cost of living, high cost of real estate. And by day, so I work in technology, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. I'm a father to a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and a husband. And when we're not doing that, we're into real estate, as you mentioned, and we invest in real estate remotely, like quite a few people do, and we specialize in long-term buy and hold single families out in the Midwest. We're primarily in St. Louis, Missouri, and Northwest Indiana, just outside of Chicago. And yeah, we've been doing this for several years. So now we got to a portfolio size, double-digit single-family homes. So we're fortunate, working hard to get it to that point. And yeah, when my wife and I aren't doing that, also a podcast host, all about success. We can talk about that if we have time. And then worked on this project for other investors as well, as you mentioned, called every REI tool that hopefully would be helpful to people that are looking for optimizing and automating their real estate journey, basically.
Yeah,
That's
I
kind of me
love.
in a nutshell.
Oh, yeah, no, I love it. I mean, I hear so much, and you have the every REI tools, you have the podcast going on. So how do you find time to even research properties to invest in now?
So finding time is always a tough one. I think it's about just being organized and just very diligent and not afraid of doing the work. And like specifically, we were chatting about this before we hit record, right? But I'm a big believer and follower of Michael Zuber, one rental at a time, right? Which basically is all about doing the work every single day, spending 20 minutes a day to kind of look at your market, look at your buy box. So basically what properties your typical property, your investment properties are. So I typically do that while my kids have breakfast in the morning. I'm sitting next to them and I'm drinking my coffee and looking at Zillow or Realtor or whatever, and plotting those new properties into my Zuber spreadsheet just to see what's new, what's changed. And then when we find something interesting, we extend offers and we go on to it. But yeah, it's busy. A lot of my nights and weekends. So my wife works in the service industry, so she often works evenings. So when I put our kids down, then I'm kind of alone for a few hours, so I can put hours into whether it's kind of reviewing our portfolio or working on some additional entries for every REI tool or interviewing guests for our podcast, right? And it just makes for long days, but productive days.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about how did you decide on what markets you were going to invest in?
Sure. So obviously, Bay Area. So I guess maybe I should start with where I've always wanted to be a, cash flow investor, long-term buy and hold, accumulating as many properties as we possibly could for our own retirement, as well as then passing that on to our kids when we're no longer here. And finding cash flowing properties around here in the Bay Area is not impossible, but as you likely know, because it's the same by you, right? It's very hard. So, instead of doing that, we started on several fronts. The first one was like our own personal residence, that we purchased here in the Bay Area. We always bought with the intention of making that a rental once we decided to move out. So we were shopping for the right property, putting in extremely aggressive offers because we needed it to work as a rental when we decide to move on to a different place, because we knew we were not going to be in San Francisco or in the city forever, especially not with 2 kids. So it was kind of always something we looked at, and we no longer own that property. We've since, sold it, but that helped us acquire a new, primary residence, as well as, several rental properties. So we can touch on that story if you want. But just because of how hard it is to find cash flowing properties around here, we started looking elsewhere, and we needed to, start thinking about investing remotely. For me, it's like, again, we talked about this a little bit offline, but like, if you kind of follow the Michael Zuber kind of method, where you learn a market, whichever it is, and you understand what's an average deal in your market, what's a good deal, what's a great deal, and what's a crappy deal in your market, in a sense, and arguably, right, the market doesn't really matter that much, because if you just look every day, you could eventually, right, put in the right number of offers, the right types of offers, to find a deal that is basically meets whatever investment criteria you have. And you can do that in any market. But for us, it was kind of by process of elimination, because we're, long-term buy and hold. We want these properties forever. We're cash flow investors. That basically eliminated the coasts for us, right? That are much more like cyclical markets, whether it's your, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, or, Boston, New York, and Washington. So then, like, no coasts for us. Then you potentially could find good cash flowing markets in the Sun Belt or the South as well. And again, because we plan on owning these properties forever and passing them down to our kids, we're like, I don't know what's going to be left of the South with the, the rate, the weather's changing, water's rising, storms are intensifying, all of this stuff. So like, let's not look down there. And then it kind of narrowed it down to the Midwest, right? And kind of the middle of the map, so to speak. And then when looking at the middle of the map, we were looking for, cities that are large enough, like 500,000 plus people, so that we had diverse, tenant pool, large enough tenant pool, diverse employment, options when it comes to property management, contractors, lenders, all that stuff. And so it narrowed it down to a few cities. And then, when I was networking, talking to, a bunch of other investors that invest out there in the Midwest, I had the impression that everybody seemingly was investing in Indianapolis and Cleveland and Columbus and Akron and all these spots. And it was like, well, if everybody's over there, why would I want to go over there and have to compete with everybody? So let's go look somewhere else. And that's kind of how we landed in St. Louis and kind of Northwest Indiana, where we are for our properties. And St. Louis was always kind of on my radar, in the sense that as I mentioned, right, I'm in technology by day. And there's this technology company that's based out of there, started out of there, that was pretty much 2 people about 10 years ago or whatever. And it grew into a pretty impressive company with that came a bunch of satellite kind of startup companies. So, part of me is thinking that maybe, one day St. Louis will become a tech center potentially. And I don't know. And that's how we landed there. And, since then there was what's the Space Force? I always joke because I never know the actual name, but the government agency for the space program or whatever, that is building a multi-billion-dollar campus in St. Louis now. So things are changing, essentially. So that's how we got there, essentially.
I love it. What I'm hearing though, and I kind of want to maybe go back a little bit just to touch on it. So from the beginning, you always had this thought of rental properties, like you're talking about your primary residence that you bought initially, and you were always considering, doing the rental thing back then.
Yeah. So, and I think, and that was before we decided, I guess, to kind of go all in, for lack of a better term, in real estate and try to grow a portfolio. It was just like, I think that likely came from my parents and my wife's parents, where, they're back in Europe. We both, my wife and I, grew up in Europe, but our parents just, bought, one rental here, one condo there, just to diversify a little bit. But maybe more importantly, because in both Switzerland and France, where my wife and I grew up, there's a wealth tax. So keeping money in the bank is not to your advantage. So they would, take out loans to buy these rentals. So I grew up in an environment where, my parents had, one rental or two, right? Something like that. So it's like, it's probably smart for me to do the same. And that's how we started thinking about our first primary residence purchase, which was a condo in the city here, in terms of, let's buy this, let's not stretch too much. Let's not just, go all out and, buy everything we could possibly, maxing out what we could afford, but find something that we're comfortable, it works for us. And then when we move out, we can rent it out. And of course, a lot of stuff changed because COVID happened, and being in a city and in a condo, not the same story anymore, but we find that, luckily, we're able to exit that condo and property, very well, before things started to get or go from bad to worse, maybe in the city. And that helped fund, like I said, part of this house that we're in now, as well as like investment properties out in the Midwest, in the Midwest. So
That's some great advice, because I got my real estate license last year, and that's kind of the dilemma that I feel like I'm facing a lot of times, is talking to clients, and they may qualify for a certain purchase, and they're trying to buy as much as they can,
max it out
for their first purchase. And like you were just talking about, you had that mindset going in, let's not extend ourselves too much, and let's start something smaller where we can leverage this down the road, also be able to save or put money aside to get another property. And that's just great advice there. And like I was saying, that's kind of the dilemma that I'm facing getting my real estate license, is some people, trying to explain to them about not extending themselves all the way to whatever they're qualified for.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
we even went as far as, when we started looking at, or we started thinking about moving out of this condo because we had our two kids and didn't want to stay in the city anymore, we even went as far as refinancing that condo to lower our monthly payment, so that when it turned into a rental, it would be, profitable, cash flowing, if not even break even, right? Worst case. So it was always kind of part of the plan, essentially.
smart. I mean, that's awesome that you went from the beginning, you had this mindset, because for me, I made tons of mistakes. I mean, you know, the whole primary residence thing, and I just thought I was going to grow old here, and I didn't really think of it like you were saying, thinking of it as the numbers to make sense when I want to convert it to a rental. And that's just awesome that you had that mindset from the beginning. Let's kind of talk about maybe your first purchase out of state. Like, how did that process go? Did you do like traditional financing? Did you do DSCR? Like, how did you get the funds to start that process?
Yeah. So I think when we decided to kind of, quote, get into real estate, or, kind of accelerate and go all in, whatever your preferred term is, and we knew we couldn't really do it around here, I started educating myself, because it was like, I want to go in informed with as much information as I possibly can. So just like almost everybody's story, right? It was a whole lot of books, a whole lot of podcasts, a whole lot of YouTube, a whole lot of Bigger Pockets, and all of the above. But I can't remember how this happened, but I came across this, both a marketplace, it's a platform, but also like a education program called Roofstock, roofstock.com. And at the time, I don't know if they still have that program today, but at that time, they basically had like a whole like online, it's both an online and coaching, or in person, whatever, I guess, like education program, which was specifically tailored to like people wanting to invest in real estate, and particularly wanting to invest remotely. So it started with that, I guess, for the first one, where it was a lot of education through that program, which I found extremely helpful. And it's, through that program that you learn and you understand that, when you're starting, you're from a pure like finance or financing the home perspective, you're better off going with conventional loans if you can qualify for those, because you're going to get better, loan products. So better rates, fewer fees, so on and so forth. And because that program was both like an educational, program, but, an arm to that company is like the online marketplace, roofstock.com, where which is, I guess, similar to a Zillow or whatever in a sense, but it lists pretty much exclusively investment properties. More often than not, they're tenant occupied, and the whole premise was, making buying a rental, investment property as easy as buying stock. So that was their whole spiel. And that's just to say that the first investment property that we bought was through that platform. So found a property that, where the numbers worked for us, and then we were able to purchase it through there, which was a great first purchase experience, because it was a very handheld experience where they really walk you through the whole process. You got somebody telling you need to do this now, you need to send this now, you need to make sure for this, for that, this other thing. They had recommendations for insurance brokers, mortgage brokers, so on and so forth. So property managers and all that. So that's how, I guess, kind of how we got into our first deal, was through that. And I guess I should say, because I didn't mention this, but I think before because maybe it sounds a little bit too easy to just go to roofstock.com and buy a house. But for probably 6 to 8 months before that happened, while I was kind of going through the education piece, I was also trying to build our team. So I knew I was going to use a property manager because I'm not going to, physically be in St. Louis or, Northwest Indiana. So looking for a property manager, looking for a mortgage broker, looking for an insurance broker, looking for contractors, all that stuff. So we spent about 6 to 8 months calling 3-4 times a day, interviewing people, property managers, acting as a prospect landlord, acting as a prospect tenant, calling recommendations, getting, mortgage broker recommendations, calling them, understanding, what we might be able to qualify for, what products we could qualify for, all that. So we kind of had all that work that was already done by the time we found, or saw, I guess I should say, this property that fit our buy box, met all of our investment criteria, and it made it easier, I guess, for us to feel comfortable to proceed with that first purchase, I guess.
So my next question is, have you seen any of your properties in person yet?
I have not, no. FaceTime or Zoom.
Yeah.
Does that qualify as in person? I don't think so.
I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
I'm just curious because I haven't even been to Pittsburgh yet. I invest in Pittsburgh, and I haven't the same thing. I haven't physically seen my properties yet, but I think that's the biggest one of the biggest obstacles for people to get over is investing, and they're like, oh, how do you even know the property's there and whatnot.
Yeah, and so I hear that all the time with people we coach and talk to about all this stuff, and oftentimes I have this conversation with people who want to get into it and ask me or comment that same thing. And I'm like, just hypothetically, let's say you buy that rental property that is the house next door to yours, and something happens. Are you going to go fix it? Do you want the 2:00 in the morning phone call because something happened? And the answer is always no. It's like, of course not. I don't know how to do plumbing or electrical or whatever. So I tell them, so what's the difference? You're going to call somebody anyway. Right. And I can't remember if this was David Green or maybe somebody on the Bigger Pockets podcast that had an interesting analogy that I'm probably going to butcher now about this, was like, when you're driving in your car and the car breaks down on the side of the road, right? Everybody will get out of the car, pop the hood, look at the engine, and essentially do nothing because nobody knows how to do anything with that. And you just, close the hood and bring it to the garage because they're the experts, they're the specialists, right? And I see it very similar. So I have specialists that take care of this for me, and they're responsible for the whole thing.
It's so funny you mentioned that because I just said the same thing on someone else's podcast about the whole that driving your car mechanic. Yeah. I think it was David Green, but exactly, yeah, I use that also. But you kind of just touched on it. Let's just stay here then real quick. You talked about coaching or helping others get started. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we spend a few hours, my wife and I, we spend a few hours every week, I guess, just helping others who are looking to get started in real estate. And when I say that, typically people don't understand what that means, and then I go to, well, it's coaching, basically helping you get started. So that's why the term, coaching. But we do that for free still today, right? We do that coming from a place where when we started, years ago, I felt pretty alone. It was, a lot of online courses, books, seminars, masterminds, $10,000 here, $5,000 there, buy this, upsell me here. People on Bigger Pockets forums that, frankly, to me, weren't helpful, because you ask one question, then you get 25 different opinions and answers. So it was more confusing than anything. And often I was like, God, I wish I just had somebody I could talk to, somebody that's done what I'm looking to do before, and somebody that I could just call or get on a Zoom or run numbers by or whatever. And I wish I had that when we were starting, and I didn't find that anywhere. So because of that, and because we found ourselves talking about what we do more and more with our just normal day-to-day entourage, coworkers, friends, family, friends of friends, coworkers of coworkers type thing, that we just said, hey, let's do this a bit more officially or formally or whatever. And now we can, people can reach out to us on our website, and they get, they can get us on the horn or Zoom and talk real estate, because we love to talk real estate.
Yeah, I love it. That sounds exactly kind of like my story, where I'm just trying to help other people get started. And it's not really coaching, like you said. I'm not charging anyone, but
Yep.
it's just talking about my journey and the mistakes I made and my story. And I love it when people reach out and get started. I'm pretty sure you probably feel the same way when someone reaches out to
100%.
you and they actually get started. I mean, that, to me, that's probably the best feeling, that someone else is taking their financial situation into their own
100%.
hands.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's awesome. So, while we're touching on this subject real quick, I mean, do you kind of tell them, or not tell them, but recommend investing in Missouri or St. Louis or Indiana? Or does it kind of, you just
So
go, oh, no, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, I think it really depends on what they want, right? And it happens very frequently that people will reach out, will talk through stuff, and the people that I'm interacting with are interested in, say, syndications. I'm not a syndicator. I know of and about, and I've done my due diligence and all that stuff, sure, but I'm not a syndicator and I'm not a syndication expert, so I can't really help. And I'm pretty quick to say, listen, I'm sorry, but I'm not the right person to help you here, because I don't know enough about this. What I know is, long-term buy and hold, single families, doing it remotely while you're super busy with the full-time job and 2 kids and other side projects and whatnot. So that's what we like to help with. So we don't necessarily prescribe any one way, but it's oftentimes also notice that people will reach out to us because they're interested in, like, they're similar people, right? Busy parents, in the Bay Area, whatever, want to do something similar because they see our story or they've heard about it or whatever. So oftentimes they want to do something very similar. And then it's just through asking them the questions or either asking them questions or answering the ones they have, that we can kind of steer them, one way or another. But that said, for a lot of people, I've directed them to, like, the markets we invest in and introduce them to our team and the people we work with, because if that can help them, and if that's, a form of shortcut, please, by all means, there's plenty of properties out there for everyone. I don't feel like we'd be competing against each other. And even if we are, and they get one before I do, good for them, right? I'll get the next one, right? It's no issue.
Yeah, I mean, I hear this all the time too, and I'm sure same thing. You feel the same way, but I feel like everyone in this community is trying to help one another. No one,
100%.
yeah, like no one is trying to, like you're saying, keep properties or deals to
No.
themselves. I mean, everyone is just willing to help. And you kind of, I heard you kind of touch on it a little bit, and I kind of wanted you to maybe elaborate a little bit more. But I know you mentioned your properties are all pretty much off the MLS.
Yep.
So you are a long-term buy and hold. So are you kind of like me, a boring investor so far? Have you done
I am
any?
the most boring person you can find when it comes to investing. Yeah, to the point, again, oftentimes when we talk to people about what we do, it's like anticlimactic, because they're expecting some secret or something different or magical or shortcut or whatever. And I'm like, no, Zillow, right? So yeah, go configure Zillow for what you're looking for and just look every day and make offers. And when it works, it works. And then, cash flow, that you get the cash flow that you get. And over time, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, whatever, when these properties become our kids' properties, then wealth will be there, right? So yeah, very, very boring, which is another thing I like about the Midwest markets. Frankly, they're very linear. They don't really go up crazily. They don't go down crazily. And they kind of, nice little, relatively steep curve up to the right. And over time, it just works. So yeah, very boring to answer your question, but it works.
No, it does. I totally agree. So I guess, staying on your portfolio a little bit, like what is the next step for you, I guess? Are you looking, this all of yours are single family homes, you said, correct?
Yes.
Are you looking to scale up into like multifamily things or?
Scale up in terms of buying more single family homes. Yes. Right now, so we're April 2023, right? When we're recording this. So right now the market's different. I think both the real estate market as well as the lending market. So while yes, it was difficult, in kind of the COVID boom and whatnot, and you had to make offers in 3 seconds because everything would fly off the shelf, 10 offers on every property and over asking, all that stuff. It's a different kind of hard now for specifically, I think, for single family homes, where, the ones that we look at that typically work for like our investment criteria, they're entry level homes for like the entry level, I guess, tenant and tenant pool. And right now, first of all, there isn't much supply. I think from what I'm seeing now, there's less supply today than there was even during COVID when everything was absolutely crazy. And the little supply that there is, oftentimes they're going to, owner occupants, first time home buyers, because they can still get much better loans on those properties than I can as an investor. 3% down, better interest rates, better insurance requirements, things like that, which for me as an investor that has already maxed out on all our 10 conventional loans, we can't compete oftentimes, or if we do, we don't get the returns that we want. So that's just a long way to say that we've started looking at small multifamily, so like on the residential side, as well as smaller multifamilies on the commercial side, just because there's less competition. And I think for the commercial stuff as well, in a year or two, you don't really know, but monitoring those, when those properties that make use of bridge debt, where that debt is come due, soon, and they'll have to refinance in today's lending environment, there might be more pain. So there might be more opportunities as well. So we're starting to look elsewhere, but I'm not necessarily interested today in a 100 unit building or anything like that. Slow and steady wins the race.
I love it. So let's say if someone was to reach out to you for, some guidance or coaching,
Yes.
what would be kind of maybe the best advice you could give them, or maybe warning? Like for me, when I'm helping people, I always tell them like I didn't prepare myself well with reserves. And that's kind of one of my biggest mistakes. And so if someone was to reach out to you, like what advice would you give them?
So I think the first thing, and I don't know how obvious this may sound or not, but the first thing that I would say, and I think it also has a lot to do with because of who I interact with most. So a lot of like my network and the people we help and interact with are like technologists, coasts, East Coast, West Coast type technology and technology money, people looking to diversify and whatnot. Oftentimes also slightly younger demographic, people who want to get into investing in real estate and whatnot. And so with that in mind, I think the first thing that I tend to tell people is to be patient, that real estate is very slow compared to pretty much everything else that they're used to, right? we pretty much live in a, microwave society where everything should be ready in minutes or seconds. Amazon delivers whatever you want to your front door. Uber Eats will, ship or deliver food to your front door. You don't have to do anything anymore. And you buy stock in a second, you buy crypto in a second, all this stuff. And then when you're like, hey, it might take you 8 months to find the first property. And then when you have an offer, it might take 45 days to 60 days before it's yours. And then it might take another 2 months to place a tenant. And then it might be another 12 months before you find your next property. I say, you got to be patient. It takes time. It takes time, right? So that's the first thing I would say. And that's bit me in the past. I was like, hey, what's going on? Why is this so slow, right? It's like, well, we have a city inspection that we need to do before you can rent this property, and they can't come out for the next 3 weeks. And then once that's done, we'll have to wait a week for the report, and you're just sitting and waiting for a lot of this stuff, right? So it's, patience.
Cool. I wish you could have talked to me before I started my journey. I mean, I think that, I'm talking about reserves, but that's part of being patient where,
Yep. Yeah. Building your reserves. Yeah.
yeah, like I feel like I tell everyone, so I have 14 properties in Pittsburgh, but I think I scaled too quickly, which has actually kind of slowed me down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But the first 4 or 5, I think, really tricked me into thinking that this was a lot easier than it is.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any problems. We had a tenant in place, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get some more. And then that's when, you have a hard time filling some of these properties, the vacancy, maybe expenses, and
the heater breaks.
Yeah.
You have a storm that rips off your roof. You have all these things that happen.
Exactly. So, I should have called you up for coaching before I got started. And, but that's awesome advice. And I kind of want to maybe transition into the next part of your story a little bit right now.
Yep.
Is kind of the entrepreneurship side and this whole idea of the every REI tool. And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So every REI tool, or everyreitool.com basically is it's an online, it's a website, right? But essentially it's a database or a catalog of resources meaning software, apps, books, podcasts, YouTube channels, online courses, masterminds, whatever it may be, specifically for real estate investors and real estate professionals. And that came from a place where, we've been doing some real estate investing for many years. And I felt like there was no one place that, at least that I could find, where I could just go to this one place, and depending on like the niche of real estate that I'm in, whether it's Airbnb, syndication, buy and hold, self-management, property management, BRRRR, fix and flip, wholesaling, you name it, there was no place where I could just go and be like, what are some good / recommended resources, so software, apps, tools, books, podcasts, whatever, for this niche of real estate. You could find bits and pieces of these things if you knew where to go. So you go to Pace Morby's, YouTube channel and community, and you find stuff for Sub2, and then you have to go to, some other person for BRRRR and some other person for, syndications or whatever. It's like, but what if I just want a place to go, and then I can look, okay, what are good tools for, like I mentioned, all these different categories. So I had the idea of just building this online catalog of every possible resource, software, app, podcast, YouTube channel, you name it, that could be useful for real estate investors and professionals, and have it in one place, have it easily searchable, easy to navigate. Say, okay, I'm starting an Airbnb thing. What should I go use as tools? So you go there, you have your MASH visors to do the, your market analysis. You have your automation tools for, tenant communication for your Airbnb. You have your, tools that talk about, Wi-Fi to capture, email addresses, all this, whatever it may be, and make it easy for people to find what they're looking for. And recently we also started adding like video interviews and reviews of these products and solutions, just so that this site is even more useful to people that go to it, basically to find what they're looking for. So that's where it came from. And because I'm in technology by day, it was a relatively easy project for me to, like a passion project for me to get started on the side, nights and weekends. And it launched, I guess, soft launch, whatever. It's working, it's live, it's there for people to go to now. It's been a couple months, I think, something like that. So it was good fun.
That's awesome. When do you find the time to sleep? Because you have the podcast, the Every REI tools. I mean, you're coaching people. I mean, when you have two young kids. I mean, how do you find the time to sleep?
Well, my awake day doing all this stuff is basically 5 a.m. to like 10 p.m. So 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. is when I sleep. It's those 7 hours right there. But everything else is pretty much taken down to the second.
I love it. I mean, I love the mindset. I love the journey, and I love like the Every REI tools is like you said, it's an awesome place to go to get information and just kind of simplifies things and just helps people in this journey. Because I'm sure you understand too. Like in the beginning, you're just like overwhelmed with just all
Yep.
this information that's out there.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
All right, so I kind of want to also talk, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier too about your coaching and helping, but has there and you also talked about Michael Zuber's channel,
Mm.
but has there been any like book or podcast that has really helped you kind of down this path of real estate and helping others?
Yeah, there's several. I don't know which one to pick, but so I think just in general for life, it's not necessarily for real estate specifically, but it explains a little bit why we spend so much time giving back and kind of building every RI tool for folks, coaching for free, all this stuff. Is Adam Grant's book called Give and Take, which is basically a whole like researched, evidence-based, scientific-based book on essentially how givers in life and the people who are generous and give ultimately typically always end ahead in life over the takers. So I've always liked that book. That shaped me a lot. It was a great book for real estate and real estate investing specifically. I think Michael Zuber's One Rental at a Time book is fantastic. I think it, again, especially for the people that I interact with the most, where it's really this story of you can have a full-time job and be super busy and take it slow and buy one house at a time, hence the name. And it can be a single family home. You don't always have to go bigger and larger, multifamilies, like it seems to be all over the place these days. So that's a great story that is easy to relate to. And then another one that I like to recommend when people are serious and kind of want to understand like what it takes to get started is Brandon Turner's, I think, what's it called? The Book on Real Estate Investing. I think it's one of his first books, I think, which I just find super useful, how it just breaks down all aspects of real estate investing. And then it kind of goes into each in more detail and is just super helpful to say, okay, I like this type of investing. And it just helps you narrow it down to what you're interested in doing.
I'm glad you mentioned that book because now somebody borrowed it from me and they haven't given it back to me yet.
That's
So
a blasphemy crime.
Yes, but yeah, that is a great book. And
Yeah.
same thing with Michael Zuber, One Rental at a Time. Like, if anyone that following my channel hasn't checked his channel out, I mean, that
Oh yeah,
to me, that
highly
is,
recommended.
yes, especially for us boring investors, like you're saying, one rental at a time off the
Yeah.
MLS. Like same thing with me. I haven't done anything crazy. I haven't done any burrs or I
Yeah.
don't do any short-term rental. Is any of yours short-term rentals?
Nope,
No.
all long term. We don't do burr either. We do rehabs and stuff, make readies for the properties to be rentable, I guess, and to kind of maximize on potential rent, but we don't do like the strictly speaking kind of burr approach.
I love it. I'm super glad you reached out to me. I mean, this has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be on, your podcast also, and
Can't wait.
I can't wait to do that. But right now, I'll give you a little bit of, opportunity for selfless promotion and kind of tell my audience like where they can find you or where, every REI tools and just give everyone where they can contact you at.
Yeah. So the easiest is just first name, last name.com. So Nathan Murith, so MURITH.com, all one word. That's just a simple landing page, easy to remember. And it'll take people to Undor, so like our investment company where we do coaching, which is also undor.com. It will take people to our The General Art of Crushing It podcast, which is a podcast about success mindset in general. There's a heavy dose of real estate in there as well. And it just will list every reitool.com for those that want to go there. So the simplest is just nathanmuirth.com and go from there. There's all my contact information, social links, and all that. So that's how people can reach out.
I love it. I love it. So before you go though, and I try to get all my guests on, as you can see, all the superheroes in the background, and
They look awesome.
You have some young kids now. So I'm feeling that you might be in the superhero game a little bit, but is there any superhero or maybe a superpower that you feel is really helpful in this journey of real estate, helping others, and your entrepreneurship?
So we've talked about this already, right? I told you I'm very boring, right? And I'm boring to the point where I'm not really into comics and comic books. But with that, our 5-year-old son is all about Batman everywhere around the house right now. So that's good fun, talking about Batman and, going through the Batman story. And I see you have Batman in your background there as well. And maybe you could tell me this, but who's the best superhero that would represent just working hard and work ethic?
You know what? You just said it. So I forget what athlete it was. He was a running back for one. I forget which team a long time, but he has a Batman tattoo on I think his leg. But
Okay.
Batman basically is not he doesn't have any superpowers. He's a
That's true.
regular.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he just works hard and he outworks everyone else. And that's that NFL or that NFL athlete
Yeah.
he had that Batman tattoo to represent he's gonna like outwork you. He doesn't have any superpowers, but he's a hard worker.
So there
And
you go.
like exactly like that,
Yeah.
totally fits the boring investor who there's nothing flashy, but is just gonna do the work.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, I love it. I can't wait to be on, join you on your podcast. But thank you again for taking
Yeah.
time out
Thank
of your
you.
busy schedule and making the time for me. But for all my guests out there, please like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and just keep doing the work out there. And we'll talk again, Nathan.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.